Yeah, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Dispensing Optician Committee meeting of Friday, April 23rd. Do we read the notice on the governor's order regarding?
No, you can just take
Okay.
establish
Okay,
it. Yeah.
so we'll go to a roll call. So I'd like to do a roll call of the members, and then if we can go through the staff and anybody else who wants to identify themselves afterwards. Let's see, Dr. Kawaguchi, are you present?
Yes, I'm present.
Okay. Member Watts, are you present?
Present.
Okay, and I'm present. That makes the three of us who are the current members of the committee. It's my understanding we have 2 vacancies. Is that still the case?
Correct.
Questions? Okay. Okay, well then we have a quorum and all 3 members present. Do we want to go through the staff?
Sure.
It's not necessary if that's
Okay. All right. Well, we can see you on the list. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. So the next order of business is public comment for items not on the agenda. Moderator, have any members of the public identified themselves or identified their interest in commenting?
This is the moderator. Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A at the request of the committee chair. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type "I would like to make a comment" and send it to all panelists. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Committee chair, no requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Close the Q&A feature. And with that, we'll move on to item 3 on our agenda, which is the discussion and possible approval of meeting minutes. The agenda states that it's for September 23, 2020, our meeting then. I believe the minutes say that it was September 17th. So can we get a clarification from staff on the proper date there?
Hi, Mr. Casal. This is Mark. Yeah, the minutes are labeled for September 17th, but the agenda has it listed as the 23rd. So I actually think this will probably need to be tabled because it is not labeled correctly on the agenda. It'll have to be tabled for the next meeting. Rebecca, does that sound correct?
well, which I'm unclear. Which is it? Is it that the draft minutes are correct and the meeting was on the 17th?
It appears the minutes are correct, but the agenda misstates that it's for September 23rd.
I think you arguably have substantial compliance and plenty of notice to the public about the accurate meeting minutes. I would say it's probably fine to proceed.
Yeah, I view that as a typographical error. So before we move on to approving these, are there any comments from the public on this item number 3?
This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A at the request of the committee. Members of the public, you can participate by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type "I would like to make a comment" and send it to all panelists. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please close the feature. Okay, is there any discussion amongst the members of the committee on the adoption of the September 17th, 2020 minutes? corrections, modifications, deletions? Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes of September 17th, 2020?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, for the record, that was Dr. Kawaguchi making the motion and Anna Watts seconding it. Do I do a roll call vote, or since they were the mover and the seconder, do I just simply vote aye and we have the 3 votes? Or
That's a good point in terms of efficiency. I think 2 notes. One is going forward, just for clarity, it's helpful to ask for public comment once the board has already moved and seconded and discussed it. That way the public can weigh in on what the action actually is. But then, as far as I understand, yeah, I think procedurally we want the actual roll call vote, because believe it or not, there are times where someone will support a motion only to then vote against it. So
right. Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Dr. Kawaguchi
Aye.
and Anna Watts.
Aye.
And I also vote aye. So that would, approval of the minutes carries 3-0. And that takes us to item number 4 on the agenda, the executive officer's report. And I will turn it over to staff for that. Shara, are you presenting?
So it will actually be me, Sheree Kimball, the Assistant Executive Officer, presenting at least the licensing program update. Shara and Natalia are attending another meeting right now. So just to quickly go over the licensing program, back last year, towards the end of the year, we lost our optician registration technician, so application times have increased to 8 weeks. But we are currently recruiting to refill that position. In November, there were some changes implemented in Breeze that have decreased the number of division applications. And also in November, 2 new things were added to Breeze. So optician registrants can apply to change their name and apply to update their registration relationship with another registration. So if a spectacle lens dispenser, for example, changes a job from one registered dispensing optician location to another, they can go online now to their Breeze account and update that information for us instead of having to send in an application or do some other way. And then just to wrap up, the American Board of Opticianry and National Contact Lens Examiners are continuing to do their tests monthly. Previously, before the pandemic, they were doing them quarterly, and at this time, there's been no announcement indicating that that's going to return. So we're kind of trying to update our work schedule to accommodate the fact that there's no longer peaks and valleys of opticianry applications. And then we have our normal statistics after that. Are there any questions about the licensing program that I can answer?
Yeah, I have a question, Sheree. It's Glenn. So do you know how we're doing as far as the number of applicants that we have and any ETA on when we'll have that position filled? Because I know it's having a risk to the processing times.
Yes. So currently, it is currently being advertised and the recruitment is open. It will be open through May 10th. We've already gotten some really good applications, so I'm hopeful that once it closes, we can interview within a couple of weeks and then get somebody on board within 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how human resources shakes everything out. So hopefully by summer, we'll have another full-time person working on opticianry applications.
From a process standpoint, do we have to wait till the application closes?
Yes.
Okay.
We did. All right, are there any other questions on the licensing section? If not, I would like to take this over to Alexander Flores to give the enforcement report.
Thanks, Sheree. Okay, so for the enforcement side of things, between July 1st and March 31st of between 2020 and 2021, quarter 1 through 3, we opened 65 opticianry cases. We closed 53 cases. We sent 3 opticianry cases to the Attorney General's office. We took 4 disciplinary actions against opticians. And we've also been working to develop comprehensive procedure manuals for the tasks that we perform in office. With great help from Brad and the rest of the staff, we've been able to develop those quite a bit over the past year to help with training and onboarding new staff. And then the last point there is we recruited and hired and trained Pink Crosby, who is our new enforcement technician. So with her help, we hope to shrink processing times and help better protect consumers. And then in the bottom portion of the memo there, it describes our disciplinary actions between July 1st and March 31st. Is there any questions that I can help answer for the enforcement side of things?
No, I don't have a question, but I'd like to thank staff for providing us access to the enforcement case information on the 4 disciplinary actions. It helps put into context what we're doing, and it's it shows the importance of our consumer protection mission. Particularly, it wasn't just a bunch of DUI enforcement cases. I mean, there were only 4 cases, but there are other issues that show why the work is necessary beyond DUI. So, thank you. Any other comments from the members? Okay, I think we can move on to the program fund condition.
Moderator, do we have Bikram on the call?
This is the moderator. I do not see a Bikram on the call.
Okay. Let me see if I can quickly contact Bikram.
Do you want to go ahead and skip to the strategic plan update, and we can work on getting Bikram on the meeting so that he can present to the fund condition?
Yes, I think we can go to 4D, and if we get a hold of them, we can go back to 4C. Otherwise, we can.
Okay. So for 4D, we have the strategic plan update. So on the agenda memo, we provided a link to our 2021-2025 strategic plan as approved by the board. And it was, the board had advised the DOC to monitor and follow the following plan objectives. So in here we have explore the possibility of requiring continuing education for both spectacle and contact lens dispenser registrations to protect consumers and high application standards throughout licensure. We have considered the feasibility of developing a state law exam for opticians to verify their familiarity with California laws. And we have advocate for the adoption of new opticianry statutes and regulations that seek to clarify the principles of the profession and provide better consumer protection for those who are seeking opticianry services. And lastly, we have monitored changes in federal law to identify methods that will strengthen existing California legislation regarding the sale of contact lenses and eyeglasses to improve enforcement and enhance consumer protection. So as a board staff, we've already had 2 meetings to help develop what we are going to do to help achieve these objectives, but we wanted to open it up to the DOC members to give feedback and ideas on these objectives to help us develop those plans. So I open the floor to the DOC members to help us explore these options.
Okay, thank you. It was nice to see the board's strategic plan included with the agenda material. I think they did a really good job, and obviously you pulled out those issues related to the committee. Do the committee members have any specific comments? I'll start with Dr. Kawaguchi.
I don't have any specific comments. I guess I would ask our professional committee member, Anna, as she looks over the plan objectives, if there are ones that she feels rise higher as far as priority, if she had any opinions on that.
I didn't have any opinion in terms of the priority.
And Anna, did you have any other general comments?
No comment.
Okay, I really didn't come prepared focusing on that. I think the important thing is that these issues that we've talked about have been captured as part of that the board has included that in their vision, in their strategic plan. And so I think this really helps focus our agendas going forward. Obviously, our presentations later today start to address some of the educational aspects of this, as mentioned in 1.2, and ultimately that can dovetail into 2.1. So I think we're on the right track here, and I think we'll leave it at that if there's no further comments. Have we got Bikram on the call for item 4C?
This is the moderator, not logged on yet.
Okay, well, we can kind of hold that open, and maybe if we get in touch with them, we can get that update after we talk about item 5. Of course, in our agenda packets, there is information on the program fund. You can see those graphs. But it still would be nice to be walked through them if we can get him on the line. So with that, we move to item 5 on our agenda, which is the presentation by the Optician Training Programs and the Professional Association regarding the educational updates. Moderator, do we have our three speakers?
Mr. Casella?
Yes.
So Ruby and Lynette will be joining us shortly. They're going to join us on their lunch break. So the timing is we're a little bit early for them to join our call today. We ran through the other agenda items a little quicker than I anticipated. So they should be joining us here in about 20 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can request a break.
That's fine. Why don't we, yeah, I think item 6 will be, won't be a tremendously lengthy discussion, and it might be informed by the presentations that we take a break, and then what time do you suggest we reconvene?
Hoping to get Bikram on the line soon, and so I'd say as soon as we can get him on, we can reconvene. But I think a 10-minute break at least would probably be fine.
Okay, so my proposal is that we all keep our connections and stay connected, and then we'll come back at 12:02. Does that make sense to the members? Anna
That's fine.
and Glenn? Oh, I don't hear you, Glenn, so maybe you're on mute. But so we'll come back in 10
Yeah, I'm good with that. Sorry, I'm good.
Okay, so see everybody back in 10 minutes.
this is the moderator. I've promoted Ruby. If we can do a quick mic check and video check.
Hi, this is Ruby. Can you hear me?
Hello, Ruby. Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure about the video, but
Okay, thank you.
all right. Oh, let's see the video here. Yes. Okay, there I am. Perfect. Okay. I'm at work. So,
Hi, Ruby. It's Bill. Good to see you.
I'm excited to be here.
Okay, so we did find out that our budget analyst is still presenting at another meeting. So if we want to go ahead and start with maybe Rudy's presentation, hopefully he'll have a chance to wrap that up and come present for us.
Okay, do we have everybody present? Do we need a roll call to recheck? Anna, are you on the call?
Hi, I'm here.
And Glenn?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so
Okay. Do you want me to start now?
yeah, so I'll just call us back to order, and we're on agenda item 5, which is the presentations by the optician training programs and professional associations. Our first speaker is our esteemed former chair, Ruby Garcia, here from the California State Society of Opticians. So, Ruby, you can take away, and welcome back from your last presentation as well.
Thank you. As
Bill,
you
if I could, Mr. Casella, if I could, can I go through the memo and present the?
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, right. I see it now. On the materials. So you'll present it.
Yes.
thank
So
you.
do you,
So
Alex,
as part of the DOC statutory mandated duties, do we still have Ruby on?
yes, I'm on. Did you want me to start speaking or did you want to say something before?
Okay, I'll go ahead. So the DOC is charged with recommending registration standards and criteria for the registration of dispensing opticians, non-resident contact lens sellers, spectacle lens dispensers, and contact lens dispensers. A critical component of these duties is to understand the issues surrounding educational programs and job requirements in the field. So if, as we all remember, at the September 17, 2020 meeting, we had a series of presenters present on their programs, their history and views of the practice of opticianry in California. And as a follow-up to that meeting, we reached out to a number of individuals to return and to give initial presentations on the subject. And today we have joining us Ruby Garcia and Lynette Garcia. Unfortunately, Erin was not able to be with us, but we hope to have her in the future at some point. So without further ado, Ruby, if you could take it away and proceed with your presentation, we'd be happy to hear it.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you so much for inviting us back. As you can see in the memo, it's starting to show an outline of the colleges that are opening up. they're doing virtual programs through teaching the ABO at this point. You can see that Moore Park is going to open up in the summer and the College of Marin in the fall. Down at the bottom, and then Sacramento City College is postponing until next year. CISO down at the bottom will start an apprenticeship. That's a statewide apprenticeship program. That's where we go in and help employers with their ABO needs and any sort of educational needs they need. And many of the RDO firms are super excited about this and having discussions with college administrators about the apprenticeship program. We're holding back because of COVID-19, but we do plan these programs to launch, as that states there, this year and next year. We are going to work on pre-optometry programs and Bachelor of Science optician programs that will be accompanied with internships. Where we're having some good successes and some struggles, we're on the second part of the memo. It says the SLD, the ABO exam, the college programs feel that it does test them for what opticians are working on. But when it comes to the NCLE, there are two different roads that opticians are taking. Some of them are definitely practicing fitting for contacts, so they want that to remain in the college programs. But we're seeing a trend of a lot of opticians simply dispensing contact lenses, and we still feel they need to have some accountability about what goes around dispensing contact lenses. We just don't want them to say, you can go ahead and freely just dispense them. We do feel they need to be trained a lot about dispensing procedures and working with consumers to protect them. The other portion that we're working on with the colleges is establishing unified standards, especially when it comes to professional codes of conduct. I know that DOC just went and updated all of those professional codes. We want to start teaching them to everyone, but we also understand that sometimes these codes apply only to the RDO firms, if I'm correct, and with the private practices, they're just going to work under the doctor's offices. So there's a lot of confusion with that we hope the DOC would start having some discussions. And then the last two sections, CISO had launched some modules, and they have a 90% passing rate. And this is what's going to help the colleges. And we're trying to increase the passing rate. We had 26 students pass the ABO and only 3 of them did not pass. So great success there. And we're hoping that with these programs, we're going to increase diversity that will bring access to eye care. Any questions?
Hey, Ruby, I'm sorry. What does CISO stand for?
The California State Society for Opticians.
Okay.
So, Ruby, this is Bill again. You had mentioned when you talked about the unified standards, some confusion with respect to the RDO firms versus the private practice. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, when in RDO firms, it is where the optician has their own license and they follow all those, they're going to be following all those professional codes. But when you go into a private practice, the optician, whether they're licensed or not, they're just following and working under a private practice, not being held accountable individually. The doctor will be held accountable, but not the optician. So it makes it very difficult for mobility. If I am working at a private practice, I don't have to abide by any professional codes because I would never be looked at if I did something that went against professional codes. The doctor would be accountable. So that's where we're hoping that the DOC would start having discussions about why isn't it applicable to everybody.
And that point, is that kind of analogous to the idea that an optometric assistant doesn't have any accountabilities other than specific to the doctor, the licensee in
Exactly.
in an optometric practice?
exactly.
But that, so that it seems is a whole, but it
Right.
seems totally understandable. It doesn't seem confusing. I was thinking we were talking about confusion amongst people, seeking the career path or,
Yeah.
on the job, but they would, they understand that difference and that it's confusing and that it's like, why is this different? These two people are doing the same job, but they're treated different.
Exactly.
Got it.
Exactly. Exactly. And the colleges, the professors want to teach everything so that it makes everyone unified. But a lot of students can just say, well, I don't need to worry about this because if I go to a private practice, I'm just under a doctor's license. And so, it's very challenging.
Oh, and the point being that some of the students aren't seeking licensure, they're just seeking the skill set to go work in the private practice and not taking that second step for the profession.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And it can be very challenging. So we'd hope that the DOC would have discussions about that because it would have everyone working under unified standards, having the same response and accountability. Because it's the discussions between, private practices sometimes and RDO firms, there is a breakage of accountability and how many of them, if they're not aware of those professional codes, they're not following them. So.
Right, and a way to avoid the reach of the board
Mhm.
is to simply not become an RDO, not take the step to get the license.
Right.
And so is your, what are your thoughts on requiring some sort of licensing for those private practice assistants versus not requiring any?
Right. I think for consumer protection, it is very important for everyone to follow those standards because it really does come down to protecting the consumer. When you just look at the example of interpreting a prescription, everyone should be accountable to interpret it correctly and protect the consumer to give them the right products. But if not everyone's held accountable, that's a huge risk. It should be more, we think that it could be more in line with everyone needs to follow this. And these are tailored to the state of California. And how could California test and prove that that everyone understands the unified standards of the professional codes and they're all following them? That's what our challenge is.
I'm interested to know, Glenn, Dr. Kawaguchi's thoughts, on this of how kind of how this works in the real world. So you see from the kind of the bigger retail end, but also just as in a mom and pop context where you have an optometrist, with optometric assistance, just like you could have an RDO with employees. It seems to me that Ruby's concern could be satisfied as long as whoever the licensee was requiring certain standards. Obviously, people aren't going to encourage people working for him to do a shoddy job, but did you have any thoughts on that, Glenn?
Yeah, so our charge as a board is to protect consumers by regulating and overseeing licensees and registrants. And I have worked in various modalities, and SLDs as well sometimes have subordinates. And we do try to accomplish within our realm, within our practice, unified standards. So I have certain expectations around various aspects that I delegate responsibility to of staff. And I do look at it ultimately as my responsibility for patient care to ensure that staff is unified, professional, accurate, and well trained. But I think, as I listen to what Ruby's talking about, I think that there still is a remaining opportunity for us to, in the sense of consumer protection, to have registrants or have a desire for people to become registrant or registered as an SLD or CLD, because I think that the overall standard, and if we have more registrants out there, there is the potential for us to ensure the delivery of unified quality of care. When we look at our enforcement, we're currently not seeing a lot of issue around examples, Ruby, that you brought up. So, analysis, accuracy, optical problem solving, things like that. We're not seeing a lot of activity and enforcement around those types of items. Most of the items that we're seeing are more related to aspects of conduct, honestly, outside the workplace. So while I do understand what you're getting at, I wonder if there's an alternate solution to try to encourage more registrants.
But would you go so far as to say that that we should encourage optometric assistants to get some sort of registry as well as an SDL, or if that's actually what they're doing?
I don't know, as a board, that's our responsibility. However, in my practice, I personally do encourage it. I encourage the training. I encourage them to study, take the ABO, get registered. So that is something that I personally have chosen to do because I understand the value of it. As far as being able to delegate responsibility. So when I have those types of individuals who are trained, registered, I delegate more responsibility to them in assisting me in ensuring proper patient care. Did that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, of course. But you started off by saying, as a thoughtful and diligent doctor, that you want uniform standards in your work environment. So it doesn't surprise me that you'd want to that you would encourage your assistants to seek out more training and skills and so forth. I guess the question is, it's like, what about those, and I'll say, if any, those doctors who don't take as serious approach to that? And I think that gets to your second point. And I only know from memory of when I was on the board that it's like those aren't the problems that we're seeing in terms of our enforcement and the consumer protection issues. It's not that the optometric assistant fit the glasses wrong. and the optometrist let that slip by. And so, yeah, more training and all of that makes sense. And you know, it's up to the supervisor to know what the subordinates can do and what level of training they might have, whether it be in a RDO practice or SDL or even in an optometry practice.
Right.
Anna, did you have any questions for Ruby or any thoughts on this generally?
I think pretty much what you had mentioned was pretty spot on, because not every optometrist that owns a practice has the same type of um, vision for their team. And I think it really comes down to who that supervisor is, because I've worked with doctors who are very passionate about ensuring that everyone is educated and understands how to do their job efficiently and professionally. But then there are other doctors who don't really do the same. And I've worked with staff where they feel very conflicted on whether they're doing something that's right or not. And the reason is because a lot of them come in with no experience, and um, it's really important that they're trained properly. And so I've had, both the retail side and the private practice side and the hospital side. And I think the consensus has pretty much been they wish there was something in place that was required. So that way there is no question about whether they're doing something right or wrong for the protection of the consumer. Because um, even looking in my personal experience when I first started, I definitely do not want to do something wrong that could harm the patient. And I've made the mistakes, but it would have been great to have things in place that was required, so that way um, we never ran into those type of mistakes that could harm the patient. Something as giving the patient the wrong prescription, not understanding that you shouldn't make substitutions unless it's approved by the doctor. Those are things that are quite common, and I've seen it where someone who's new, they come in, they're just like, oh, I didn't know. I thought as long as the numbers, the sphere is right. I didn't know base curve or diameter, any of that mattered. And, those are things that I've seen firsthand. Um, but I also get the feedback from vendors that I've worked with, and their biggest issue is the fact that a lot of the optometric assistants don't understand the boxing system. They don't understand how to properly fit patients for glasses, and they're willing to always help the doctors to train the staff. But if it's not being enforced on an everyday basis, then it kind of falls on deaf ears. But that's just kind of my personal experience.
Thank you. And Ruby, is it you can speak for yourself on this, but is it your goal or recommendation that ultimately the board adopt such a uniform standard? You're talking, Ruby. I can't hear you.
And I know you can see me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Good. Follow, and they want students to show up to class to say, you're required to learn these professional codes. They also want to have distinction of let's teach some to do the contact lens fitting, and let's teach the others who are just going to dispense the contacts. They want to create program teaching both sides so that people and the optician else is working. It's just those two are, we do need some discussion or some help, I should say, to see if we can go in two different directions.
So your audio cut in and out there. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Can you now?
Yes. Buffering.
Ruby, you're buffering, so I think I heard what you said. So Ruby, if you can
Okay.
hear me, I'm gonna make a comment about what you just brought up, and to put it in context with optometry schools across the U.S. So optometry schools across the U.S., they teach to the highest standard that would be necessary to practice in any state in the U.S.
Good.
Or sometimes
Yes.
abroad. And so that could be a way for not just the schools that you're involved in, but all the schools to have those conversations, to be teaching to those standards. And the standards are usually reflected in the testing. So in optometry, the standards are reflected in the NBEO, National Board Examiners of Optometry. And for opticianry, it'd be reflected in the ABO testing.
Perfect. Perfect. That is exactly what we'd like to see happen.
So this is Bill. This kind of goes back to it might have been the first meeting of our committee when we were talking about the concept of continuing education. And it was a spillover from even maybe the board's discussion on changing continuing education requirements. And at the time, Governor Brown's philosophical position was that we don't really need statutes or regulations to mandate continuing education. That should be something that the professions do, essentially do on their own. And in looking through these programs, it's like, oh, it looks like the schools have come up with the program on their own. And as Anna and Glenn have said, yeah, and employers want people who know what they're doing. And so it looks like these programs that are discussed in Ruby's memo at the different colleges really have addressed that. And I think Glenn's point is, it's like, yeah, the standard that they should teach to is the ABO. And then in doing that, you'll get a unified curriculum, amongst these folks. I'm imagining the actual substantive learning and what they're teaching is probably pretty close at all of these programs.
Yes.
And so kind of that is the standard. So that's there. And then that takes me back to Ruby's original point of, yeah, we need to just encourage more people to get their registration and make it like a worthwhile goal. But I think the colleges have done or are doing their part. So I'm not sure where, you know, our role, how to kind of improve this all.
It is more about, I think, what Anna, are you hearing me? Am I coming out
Yes.
clear now? Okay,
Yes.
it's more to what I think what Anna and Dr. Kawaguchi comment, you know, it's not only bringing and individually, but if it were enforced, that's required, then everyone sees it like there's an accountability, because there are people that'll just opt out and say, well, I don't have to do this. And, you know, they're not going to follow everything. That's where I think the discussion should be. We are, as colleges, we are going to do our part. We're going to be available to help this process. We just need everyone to say, look, it is our responsibility. We do need to get this done. And that's the discussion we're reaching out to you.
So is it your goal to require the educational component in addition to the licensure?
No, it's more
Certification?
about, yeah, it's more about the practice. Everyone can get the education any which way they like. There are a lot of different options. It's about having more registrants, as Dr. Kawaguchi had mentioned, having people, you've got to do this. You've got to go out and get your ABO, and you've got to finish this because it's bringing everyone to a higher standards. That's what we're really after. As far as how they approach it, they're going to be able to approach it any which way they like.
Okay. Do the other committee members have further comments?
No comment.
Okay, I couldn't hear from Glenn, so you can interrupt if you do have a comment. Are the other presenters available? You have on the agenda Aaron and Lynette.
Lynette's here.
Oh, hi, Lynette. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Did you have a formal update to your presentation from September?
We do. I actually sent the presentation to Alex.
Okay.
Will I have access to share from my screen, or will you guys be controlling that?
We all have a copy.
Right.
This is
but-
the
Moderator,
moderator.
can you, oh, go ahead.
This is the moderator. Ms. Garcia, you now have the presenter role.
I have the presenter role. Will you be showing my presentation?
I do not have your presentation. If you would like to share it, you can click on the share button. It should be probably the third from the left to the right on your WebEx screen.
It doesn't give me that option.
Do you have your command row at the bottom center? There's your mute button. There's a start video, and there should be one that says share.
Correct. The share button's blacked, or it's muted out.
Just a moment. From the top left, there's file, edit, and share. If you click on share, there's that drop-down menu, and the second item is file. Are you able to do it from there?
File, edit, and then share. Let me try that. Hmm. Let me see. This is downloading the wrong one. Let's see. Let me see. All right. Okay, I think this will work. I'm not sure if I was trying to download or show my screen from my Google Slides. All right. So this is an update from our original presentation from our optician dispensing program. We ran our initial program last year from October until February of this year. Let's see. This is information about myself. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, and I currently teach at Winking Bee. And I don't know if Annie made it onto the meeting. She is my new old teacher instructor. She was actually one of the original instructors with the Kenyatta 2-year program 20 some odd years ago. So she has a breadth of experience in regards to teaching, particularly in the area of optics. Our mission remains the same. We do look to create careers out of the optician training program. Being that we had started the program 2 years ago as ophthalmic tech, we realized that the optician training program offers more flexibility within the industry itself. Upon completion of this program, the student should be able to pass the ABO and obtain their license to practice in California. Now I know you guys were talking about something earlier when I jumped in on the meeting, and I did want to ask about that at the end. This is just our curriculum overview, and of course we do a lot with anatomy. We just did that last night. We'll go over prism overview in terms of vertical imbalance, 30, 45, and 60 rule. We have a very small intro into contact lenses. Excellent. The feedback from the students was great, and so I really appreciated that. We did a survey at the end of our program, and this was the model that we presented to them. So the students complete the training, they take their ABO exam. They don't generally begin internships because most of them are able to get a job or placement in a job. However, we would like to have an internship program once COVID is over. Of course, COVID presented its own unique set of challenges because everything was pretty much online. We did have 3 in-person labs, and this semester we have 4. So at the completion of our last program, we gave them a survey. In order to actually pass the final, they had to take the survey. We started out with 22 students. We had 2 drop immediately due to conflicting schedules, and we had 15 that completed and passed the course. That means that they passed and took all of the subjects. They passed all of our quizzes, as well as the midterm and the final. So let's see what the students had to say. Did the course curriculum cover useful information? Out of the 15 students, we had 13 students that gave us very positive results. 4s and 5s out of 5. We had 1 student that was somewhat neutral. This was also anonymous in terms of the survey. So the course activities, specifically we were talking about the in-person labs in addition to the online platform. In regards to, we use a lot of CISO. CISO was our primary platform, as well as some things with Laramie K and Education U. The coursework is to prepare them to take the ABO. So 9 out of our 15 students said yes. I do know personally 2 of the students, they weren't actually taking the class to pass the ABO. Their doctors sent them to expand their knowledge within optical. Can they pass it? Absolutely. One has an interest in doing so, the other one does not. In response to the in-person labs, we had 9 positives. We had 3 that were on the fence, and then 2 that, or 1 that wasn't sure. So this will actually explain itself more when we give a breakdown as to who our students were. This is some of the feedback that we received from our students. You know, to ask them directly, what did they find helped in terms of the in-person labs? What activities did they find most beneficial? And I just have a highlight of a few. I couldn't fit all 14 responses, but interestingly enough, they enjoyed working on the manual lensometer, because those that were in the field had never worked with the manual lensometer. So they really didn't understand what they were reading when they were reading a pair of glasses. And the manual lensometer really helped them to understand, oh, -3, -2, cylinder access of, 120. The hands-on is always great. It was better to see in person, and yes, we could have been definitely more organized. I 100% agree with that. Again, COVID did present itself with some problems. We did have some glitching in terms of Zoom, but we managed, we definitely got through it. I would love to have had spent more time doing much more hands-on activities, taking PDs, doing OC, seg heights, and then explaining why they're important. We spent most of our labs doing that. Our labs are 3 hours long, and they tend to fall on a Thursday evening, and it is required that they attend them. So again, they learned to use different machines, and due to COVID, they had hoped that the labs would. We did intertwine some of our lessons within the labs because we thought it was pertinent. For instance, optical crosses. We spent 30 minutes within the lab itself working on optical crosses and transposition because they were reading lenses on a lensometer, and it was just easier to understand. Okay. So these are the goals that they expressed, whether or not they were able to attain them. 7 of them said they were doing it to get a job or retain a job, and I will explain that in a little bit. Enter college training. Some of them were just kind of tippy-toeing their way in, unsure of what they wanted to do, and they were looking for a career shift. I had 2 students that were looking for a career shift. They were older, and they were just looking to shift into something different. One of them did pass the ABO while they were in class. This is where the breakdown comes. It's very interesting. It was, and we're finding this with the same ratio with our current class. 50% are currently in optical. They're in the optical industry. Most of your corporate stores are requiring them to be ABOC certified as well as California licensed. That comes into play in regards to what the expectation is for opticians moving forward. 7 of them, or half of them, were not in the industry. Interestingly enough, my non-industry people actually stayed with the class. All of them stayed with the class with the exception of 1. So it's very interesting, the dynamics. And I think this is where, if I'm not sure where I jumped in on the conversation, this is where if we had a level of consistency within the industry for expectations, not just with the corporate stores, but also with private practice, it would be super helpful in terms of knowledge, and then acknowledging the skill set of a certified or an ABO certified optician. these are some of the industry partners that we've worked with and are moving forward and working with. We have, of course, Warby Parker, Costco, CISO, Marchand, Hoya, National, Europa was kind enough to donate 500 frames. Wallman has donated a pupillometer. Target is looking to assist us in terms of internships. Hoya granted us money for ABO reimbursement, and CISO has been one of our primary platforms in terms of teaching and resources for the students. Currently, our program just started. It started on April the 15th, and it ends on July 15th. It is a heavily subsidized program, and in such that the cost is only $99 to the students. And it does include their access to CISO, which is again our online platform, as well as the PDFs and books that we provide. We have 4 in-class lab dates. Those are May 5th, June 10th, May 27th, and June 29th. Again, there'll be 3 hours, and they will have some COVID requirements. And you can contact myself, Lynette Garcia, at this email. That's lgarcia@smuhsd.org, as well as the program coordinators with the schools. Mercedes White is with Kenyatta College, and Stephanie Kriebel, which I believe was on the meeting earlier but had to jump off, is with the San Mateo Adult School and Learning Center. And I think that's it. Any questions?
Thank you for your presentations, Lynette. Anna, do you have any questions?
No questions.
And Glenn?
No, I don't. Did you have a question for us? You had teased us earlier.
I do. I've sat in on a couple of the meetings when they were in person, and there was talk about the California Board of Optometry creating their own ABO type program. You know, I don't know if it's in conjunction with the current ABO. I'm hoping that it's something separate that we have on our own, so that we would be able to turn in our continuing education to one party and maybe have just one registration or renewal fee. Where are we on that? Are we still talking about that? Do we have a timeline for that?
Well, I don't know the specific details. Staff, can you help us out here on where those discussions were, how it would fit in?
I think that this is something, hi, this is Sherry Kimball, the Assistant Executive Officer, and I think that this is something that, yes, we are looking at, but as more of a long-term issue. So maybe in the next year or two, we might have some more discussions about it.
So long-term issue, what does that mean?
Like, not that it's a long-term issue, but that it's something that we're not going to be getting to right now. But something that we may be pursuing further down in more meetings.
Do you have an ETA on that? And the reason why I ask is because when I sat in on some meetings a couple of years ago, that was very similar to the response that I got that you just gave me. And so is this, I guess, what are the challenges that that are being presented such that we are unable to implement our own program?
I don't know that that's something that really I can give all of that information. But as far as the board creating and presenting sort of a an examination like ABO does, that's something that, like I said, we're not looking into right now. It's something that's already being done by an organization that has been deemed sufficient. So at this point, we don't have the capacity to take on duplicative work.
Okay.
And I think that the priorities for the Dispensing Optician Committee have been primarily with updating the statutes and regulations, um, and getting those kind of more in order before we start tackling more in-depth items like the examination structure or whether or not we require continuing education.
Okay, I think that was more to my point, was more the continuation, the continuing education piece, as well as the renewal fees and the registration fees, because within California, we don't have to be certified or licensed. I think that it's unfortunate, particularly in private practice, because there's the challenge becomes, you know, we don't have enough opticians, right? And I think if we up level the game or we up level the requirements, it's helpful for the industry as a whole, because it gives opticians an actual professional standing, whereas now they get mixed in with, you know, some of the tech positions. And, you know, we have a very special skill set that I think really would be helpful if it was acknowledged within the industry itself. So, you know, if we're going to have, you know, registration and so forth, I just went through it to get my SDL, then I think it would be super helpful to be supportive in that regard. And it's something, you know, I can send an email, you know, and follow up with this in regards to that. But I am just curious as to how we can manage that and raise the level of presence in terms of being a certified optician and making it a type of requirement if you have an optical dispensary within your practice that, you know, like a store, you have to have a registered dispensing optician on premise. Does that make sense? Because I know right now we're doing it under the doctors, and I'm not, I don't know, it delineates the role of the optician, I guess. I mean, some doctors appreciate it. I happen to work for doctors that are great. That's what they do. All of us, all of the opticians within our practice, we're all certified. We're all ABO certified. We have about 10 years minimum experience. And so, not that I'm saying that you have to have that level of experience, but I do think that if we can up level the requirements within the industry as a whole and not just the big box stores, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation and your input on those latter points. Obviously, these are, I think, when I think of, oh, that's a long-term thing, it's like, that's a really big picture issue. That would be like a sea change potentially in how the profession is regulated in California, or what requirements we have. And so it's just a bigger lift to do that. And that's why I asked the same question to Ruby about, you know, is the recommendation that we have this sort of requirement, and the educational piece follows. Once you have the requirement, then the best way to satisfy that is to get educated, so you could pass whatever the standard is, and then you can have that. And to my point earlier as well, was that you also have this world of the optometry practices, which are separate from the RDOs, and how people end up working in the two and what's required of the two is different. And you have mom and pops, a big box store, and then you have just a private optometry practice, and they're really different models. And when we're talking about a requirement like this, it would apply to across the board and essentially, and that's
Yes.
why I think we think of it as a big picture issue. But I think that's the benefit now of having the dispensing optician committee part of the board of optometry, and this is something that happened a few years ago, and I think we're finally getting our heads around all of these issues and where it fits in, and that's why I'm so pleased to see you weren't listening when we were discussing the Board of Optometry's strategic plan for the next 4 years or 3 years. But our issues are included in that, and we are part of that. So I think that, including continuing education and how that gets addressed. So I think you're right. You're spot on in terms of pointing out the issue, and then the hard part is, okay, how do we address it? So thank you again. Any further comments from Anna?
No comment.
Glenn?
Yeah, so Lynette, thank you for attending. Thank you for your feedback and your thoughts. I appreciate it. And if you have a chance, go ahead and take a look at the materials for this committee meeting, and then you'll see what Bill was talking about as far as the strategic plan and how ideas that you may have now or going forward might be encompassed in intentions of what we want to work on over time.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. So do we were we planning on Aaron joining us?
No, Mr. Casella, Aaron will not be joining us today, but we can circle back to Vikram. He's available to speak on the budgets now.
Okay, so let's wrap up this this item 5. I think we've had a good discussion about it. I don't see that there's an immediate action on it, but I think we want to keep this discussion going, because we have this new data and new information that we can kind of put into context. So I think so. My question to staff is: do we request further public comment on this, since though no action's being taken?
Yes, please.
Okay, so moderator, can you open the rolls for any public comment on this issue?
Yes, this is the moderator. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type, "I would like to make a comment" in the Ask field and send it to all panelists. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. And Nicole, I do see you have your hand up. I will unmute your microphone.
Hi, I just put my I wanted to hear Lynette. I'm co-teaching with Lynette, and she's doing a fabulous job with the program. And it says Kenyatta University. It's really Kenyatta College on the agenda. So I just wanted to say hi, and I'm happy to be here. I don't know how to make my camera work, but that's okay. So I'll let you get on to other important business, but thank you.
Thank you for joining us and letting us know. We'll make sure that the updated minutes refer to Kenyatta College. And thanks for your work with Lynette on this. Were there any other public comments?
No additional comments. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please close the Q&A feature and public comments for item 5. So if we can move back now to item 4C, we were going to get an update on the program fund.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
All right, well, good afternoon and happy Friday, members of the committee. My name is Bikram Dhaliwal. I'm from the DCA Budget Office. I'm here today to present the status of RDO Programs Fund and just give a general budget update. I believe everyone should be able to see the expenditure projections on their screen right now, as well as the fund condition statement, which I'll get into later. Those pertain to agenda item 4C. So I'll go ahead and just quickly outline them, and I'll be happy to address any questions you may have along the way or after. And so I'll go ahead and start with the board's expenditure projections. And so if you have those in front of you, these are the fiscal month 8 expenditure projections. So they go through February, because that's the 8th month of the fiscal year. And you could see some historical information kind of towards the left side of the document with fiscal year 17 through 20. But we're going to be focusing mostly on fiscal year 2020-21, which is the current year. So in the middle, there's a column that says current year revised budget, and anything to the right of that, that is what pertains to the current year, 2020-21. And just to skip ahead a little bit and then I'll backtrack. So if you look at the bottom right of the expenditure projections, you'll see the surplus deficit, and it says 8.6%. So basically what that means is that based off of these projections, which take into account data through fiscal month 8, we're projecting 441,000, roughly 441,000 to be reverted out of RDO's appropriation. So RDO's total appropriation is 482,000, which is in that central column towards the bottom, that net appropriation line item. So 482,000 is the total appropriation. Out of that, we're projecting about 441,000, which leaves us with a surplus of 41,482. And that equates to an 8.6% surplus out of the entire current year budget, which is overall good news in the sense that the total amount budgeted was 482,000, and 41,000, almost 42,000 of that is going to go back into the fund and ultimately have a positive effect on the remaining fund balance, and which we'll see tie into the fund condition when I get into that later. And as you can see, looking at that last column, unencumbered balance, the numbers that are in red, those mean that we're projecting that by the end of the year, the expenditures will exceed the budgeted amount. And although that might sound a bit alarming, overall, the numbers that are in black in the unencumbered balance column, those mean that we're anticipating reversions or savings for those budgeted line items. So overall, when you take into account all of those items and you add them up, we get 41,482, which I mentioned just a moment ago. So that is the overall savings, and the majority of that 41,000 is actually coming from large savings in line items such as Attorney General and travel and state. As we all know, we're still in the middle of this pandemic, and so throughout this whole fiscal year, we've noticed across many DCA boards and bureaus, travel was a line item where we saw significant savings due to meetings like this being held virtually through WebEx, and just less travel across the board. So that's why we're projecting no expenditures from travel. There's 6,000 in savings coming from that. And then even for Attorney General, it looks like despite a $70,000 budget for AG. As of now, the way that cases are going, I'm projecting a $21,000 expenditure for AG, and so that leaves us with about 48,000 in reversions, which are basically savings in that sense. So a lot of that reversion for the current year is coming from those two line items, despite other line items maybe exceeding the budget. Overall, we're seeing savings, and that's ultimately good news because that's going to help the fund. So I know I kind of skipped over some of the sections there, but I just wanted to provide an overview before I get into the fund condition. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them now before we move into the fund condition.
Any questions from Glenn?
Yep. So my question / concern is we currently are understaffed in the department. And so we have that situation, but yet we're anticipating being in the red, basically. So if we were fully staffed, that would be a larger negative item. And while it might not have a deficit issue with the bottom line, do we take that into account that we don't have full staff right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did work with the program staff about 2 months ago. It was in February. I didn't get a chance to speak with them and consult with them prior to this meeting in regards to an update for the personnel services, but we did talk extensively about it in February. And that was when I found out that there's only about 2 positions, I believe, that are allocated for RDO. And out of those, and then there was even a temp help category. So that's why you see that 16,648. But the employee that was in temp help, I believe, then got switched into permanent. I'm going to have to speak to program staff perhaps after this meeting to verify that. But I do know that the staff member who was in temp help did, I think, get shifted into permanent. So that's why we're seeing some higher costs for salary and wages. And like you said, it is in the red. So if that pattern continues into, well, actually, that brings me to my next point, which is the fact that RDO is merging with optometry next fiscal year. So this budget is actually going to get merged into optometry. So even if next year RDO's 2 staff positions were filled, we won't see the red on this expenditure projection anymore. If anything, it will just get absorbed into optometry's expenditure projections and their fund condition. So for the current year, yes, it does look like we're a little bit in the red. It looks like about 16,000 for that personnel services area, but which I know isn't always the best thing to see. But on the bright side, the good news is that 16,000 that's projected to be overspending the budget for personnel services is getting vastly absorbed by OE&E, the operating expense and equipment section. And if your concern was about moving forward into the next fiscal year and onward, that is something we'll have to look at next fiscal year when this entire budget and the positions associated with it get absorbed and merged into optometries. And then that's when I'll probably have a better idea of if that's a concerning area.
Good afternoon, all. I apologize. Just wanted to step in case members had additional questions. It's Shar Murphy, Executive Officer for the board. I'm the staff Bikram's been talking about. And I apologize. We've had several other meetings with DC Executive on budgets as well today. But just wanted to make sure that you know that I'm here. If you had any additional questions, we are certainly watching that bottom line. Of course, bottom line budgeting is how it works around here, right? So even if our categories are out of whack, as long as we're able to do a reversion and keep that reversion within a 6-month reserve, then we are statutorily sound. But we are keeping an eye on that in order to use some of that savings in order to work on our backlogs in both licensing and in enforcement. We are just as of earlier this week putting out or have started to publicize an open position within licensing for the RDO program. As Bikram mentioned, we are going through the process of combining the two funds and looking for some efficiencies when we're able to have those folks over in enforcement who haven't been able to touch any of these opticianry enforcement cases, the ability to spread some of that workload around. We're also looking, right, as we merge the two budgets, that we will merge caseloads or file loads for our licensing staff as well. We've seen a flattening of kind of the peaks and valleys, as was mentioned earlier in the licensing update. Now that we're doing, now that ABO is doing opticianry testing every month as opposed to every quarter, that has flattened out a little bit more, and so made things a bit better for our licensing staff. But once we do combine those two program funds, we're able to use all of our resources to sort of surge to where we've either got graduates or we've got an influx of tests, and we're able to better use our staffing dollars to get through our workload. So I'm watching that 41,000, and I'm going to use it as best I can to give some relief to our staff members who are overworked. But we are for sure going to make sure that we're able to have a reversion and still be fiscally sound with that 6 months reserve.
Further questions, Glenn?
Nope, that's it.
Anna, did you have questions?
No questions.
I have one question, and that is on our saving, relates to our savings on travel. Is it anticipated that the governor's suspension of the Bagley-Keene or Brown Act, or the meeting requirements, that will go through the end of the fiscal year?
So we do anticipate it will go through the end of the fiscal year, mostly because it is tied to the state of the emergency. And we don't foresee that that will actually be dismissed soon. I know, we're making some great strides across the state with vaccination, but still, of course, trying to contain outbreaks in pockets. So the ability to do dispersed meetings like we're doing today is a part of the state of emergency. So we know that we can feel pretty confident that's going to last through the end of June. There is movement in the legislature to make a statutory change that would allow you to continue to do meetings in this way. And our board is reviewing that. Our Leg committee it will review that, and then as well as the board and many DCA boards and bureaus are in favor, of course, of that, because we are seeing the cost savings, but also because we've seen an increase in public participation. So there is definitely a movement to continue that, and hopefully we'll get sign off from the legislature to make that change permanent.
Great, thank you.
Of course.
Bikram, I think you had more slides, maybe?
Yeah, so if there's no other questions regarding the expenditure projections, I'll go ahead and jump into the fund condition statement, which I did send within the past 2 hours, I believe. So I know it's a bit late. I'm not sure if that was added to the material here. But it looks like it is. So we have that being shared here. And so this is the fund condition statement for the RDO program. And with the first column being 1920, those are actuals for both revenue and expenditures. And then to the right of that, we have current year 2020-21, which take into account the fiscal month 8 revenue and expenditure projections. And then beyond that, for 2021-2022 budget year, those figures tie to the governor's budget and onward as well. And then so we believe that these are the most up-to-date figures and projections for both revenues and expenditures, and just the state of the fund overall, especially in regards to the current year with fiscal month 8 projections, now that we're 2/3 through the fiscal year. So I'll go ahead and start with current year, the revenue side. So it looks like revenue is on track to materialize to about 696,000, with renewal fees leading the way. That's generally how it is. Renewals are the main revenue driver. And so 696,000, so about 16,000 more projected than what was collected last year. And then other than that, moving down into, I think they got split into two. So the top half is revenues, and then the bottom half is probably expenditures. It should be maybe the second page. And then for the expenditures for current year, that 441,000 is pulled directly from the fiscal month 8 expenditure projections that we just covered. So I plugged that number in, which it gives us a more realistic and accurate display of where the fund will actually ultimately end up at the end of the fiscal year. So when you take into account fiscal month 8 revenues and revenues and expenditure projections, we end with a fund balance of 1,316,000. And I know with the months in reserve, it's a bit funky saying that it's 343 months in reserve. Obviously that's a bit skewed in the sense that it's a formula-driven calculation for months in reserve, and it's tying to the budget year. And as I'm sure we're all aware, RDO is merging with Optometry. So that's why in budget year, we see mostly everything zeroed out other than statewide pro rata and supplemental pension payments. But everything else is zeroed out, and it's going to be at the beginning of 2022-23 where we see RDO's remaining balance, which will be in the 1.3 million range, get merged into Optometry's fund. But that's ultimately good news in the sense that there's reversions in the fiscal year and revenues coming in. So whatever remaining balance is left over at the end of this fiscal year will then, about a little more than a year from now, July 2022, that's when it will get merged into Optometry's fund. And that's according to Bill, I believe it's Assembly Bill 896. So that's what combined the two funds. So yeah, that's ultimately it for RDO. It's pretty short and sweet in the sense that it's about a $400-something-thousand budget. And I just wanted to touch base on the merger, and that's why it's a little interesting. That's why we see the zeros for the other 2 years on the fund condition. But that's about it for the current year at least. So if there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them this time.
Thank you, Bikram. Anna, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Glenn?
No.
And I have none. Thank you for the presentation. I know you've had a busy morning so far, so thanks for helping us out.
Of course, yeah, no problem. And thank you, and nice meeting you all. I look forward to any other future meetings. I'll be more than happy to present, and feel free to reach out if there's any other questions.
I just wanted to echo the chair's sentiments. Thank you so much, Bikram. We know you were in multiple meetings this morning, and we appreciate you and also your budget manager, Karen Munoz, being flexible with us as we move through our agenda. So thank you both for being able to cover all those bases today. We appreciate it.
Of course, no problem. And everyone, have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so at this point, we've finished the 4 items under item 4. Is it appropriate to open it for public comment?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay, well, if the moderator can open the rolls.
Thank you. This is the moderator. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. Committee Chair, no requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Please close the Q&A feature. that takes us to item 6 on the agenda, future agenda items. Does anybody have anything we haven't talked about before that we want to get kind of on staff's plate to start thinking about? Anna?
And nothing on my end.
Glenn, how about you?
Yeah, so I have a couple, they're not major items, but I think as we were talking to the opticianry programs, the educational programs, for us, as we move forward making decisions, it might be helpful for us to have some stats. I had mentioned this at the last meeting, some stats on our audience, our registrants. So having understanding of the number of SLDs and CLDs. Are we seeing an increase? Are we seeing a decrease in the total population? And also, if we can get from the ABO, just like a brief snapshot of pass rates, whatever data that they might have that they could just share with us easily. Again, there's no urgency to it, but I think it'll help us as we work through some decisions that we're going to be making related to the strategic plan.
Yeah, Glenn, I think that's a good idea, and I think we could make those specific data requests as like subcategories on the future agenda item about those big picture issues on the professional training and education and that. So we keep that on the agenda, and we have that data request as part of it.
That would work. That's perfect.
And so that was, I wanted to keep that discussion open, that item as a possible agenda item as well. And the other thing, obviously, we don't control it, but I would really hope for ultimately, filling out the vacancies on our committee so we can have a robust discussion, with the practitioners. Obviously, the committee was created for a reason, statutorily, and we get the benefit from the nature of Glenn's experience, that's helpful. Obviously, when Ruby was on the board, she was the board representative, and so that was helpful. But otherwise, we just have one registrant or licensee from the RDO and SDL community, and it would really be nice to have these discussions with a full complement from those groups. But I'm probably preaching to the choir. So any public comment on future agenda items? If the moderator could open the Q&A on that to see if it's some suggestions.
Thank you. This is the moderator. I've opened up the Q&A. Members of the public, the instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click on the Q&A icon at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen and type, "I would like to make a comment," and send it to all panelists. Committee Chair, no requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Please close the Q&A feature. And with that, we'll move to item 7, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
No motion is necessary.
Oh, perfect. And I will adjourn the meeting. I'm pounding on my laptop now. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, staff and members, for participating today.